Hey everyone, Swift here again, and today we're going to be talking about animated creatures and props in 3D. What they are, where to get them, how they work, and how you can best make use of them. I'm glad to be joined today by DigiDM, who some of you may already know or remember from work they've done with us here at BaileyWiki in the past. For example, the maps they've made, which had bespoke animated features. Appropriately enough, their current project is the 3D animations module for Foundry VTT, which is very relevant to our interests here. Digi, I think it might be appropriate if you gave your own description of what the module is and what it's for.
Hey everyone, at the most basic level, it's a collection of 3D models that have animations attached. At its fullest use, models can be set to interact with a click, and monster animations can match their attacks. They can react to hits, or even fall over and die when the HP drops to 0. The module has nearly 1,000 animations and growing. Animations not only bring the world to life, but gets your players engaged as they click around and maybe even move more cautiously through the dungeon since the floor can collapse at any time.
Alright, so interactivity and immersion I think are the big things when it comes to a module like this. We have, I'll be showing some B-roll on the screen right now, showing off some of the animated monsters and so on, engaging in combat, that sort of thing. And I think one of the more powerful things with this module is the extra impact that's added by having reactive tokens, either for the party or for the monsters or both, and as well as in animated map elements as well. So we've got this module here, this 3D animations, and it's got animated tokens, animated monsters, that sort of thing. So, say I was a DM who was interested in using this sort of thing. What sort of thing would I specifically use it for, and how would I go about using it? I know that you can just open up a compendium, which is this creatures compendium here, for instance, and then drag things into the scene. For example, this earth elemental here. But then, what kind of prep do I need to do to kind of get use out of this thing?
Well, directly from the compendium, the creatures in there are all of the D&D 5e SRD monsters. And so if you have MIDI QOL installed, these monsters will be built in with the coding where there's, say, the Earth Elemental Slam attack would be matched up with their Slam animation. So right out of the box, you can drag a monster onto the scene, and they will have their animations tied to their actions.
So in terms of how to use the module, it's not really a highly technical sort of thing. It's more a kind of creative tool, at least as far as the DMs go. They just kind of pull it out and then away they go. I think a lot of people will probably appreciate, especially considering how manual things in 3D Canvas used to be a while ago. So I think for a lot of players, they're already going to know that this is something they want, and they're going to head over to the Patreon link in the description and go have a look and see what there is. But I think we should still have a little bit of a closer look at what an animated actor is in kind of more detail in terms of 3D Canvas. Kind of how they work, sort of thing. Because I know that fundamentally what these are is they're just normal tokens, but they have animation indices or indexes, and each one of these is essentially a little animation that you can trigger in any way you like. For instance, would that be correct?
Yes, so if we look at the Earth Elemental, if he wasn't animated as just a standard painted model, that's what he would look like. And if I right click and go into the animations, at the bottom there are numbers 0 through 6, and so he's got number 1 as an idle, number 2 is a slightly different idle, number 3 is his slam attack, number 4 is him rising up from the earth, so you can make him appear that way. Number 5 is him going down into the earth. And then number 6 is him just down as a pile of rocks.
So we've got these sort of animation indices, and without getting too technical, we're essentially triggering these animations whenever we do, like, an attack, say. So what we've got is, with the Earth Elemental here, he's got a slam attack. So you've got it set up so that when he uses the slam attack, that triggers animation index 3, was it?
Correct, I believe. Yep, 3.
Yeah. And then that plays the animation, and he punches your hero in the face.
And then returns to a idle animation. But yes, the slam, and then back to idle.
That is, I think that's probably one of my favorite animations, is just the Earth Elemental uppercutting people. It definitely looks like it hurts, for sure. So, say I wanted to set this guy up to be lying on the ground, hidden, and then to emerge when I trigger it somehow. Is that something that's easy to do? Like, for a DM who isn't really that technical?
Absolutely. Once you drop him on the scene, we can check his features, and I can choose Earth Glide, and he will move down into the earth and rest as a pile of rocks. And then my unsuspecting players can walk up, and I might select him once again, use that Earth Glide feature, and it will toggle the other way as you say, roll initiative.
I think dramatic entrances are something that get a good reaction. I've noticed from my players whenever I have an NPC or a monster appear in an unexpected way. So I think that kind of thing is pretty cool. Especially tied into features like the Earth Glide here. You've got the Earth Elemental being able to go through earth and rock, as they are wont to do. So I think one of the things I like most about Foundry is just how how much control the DM has. So, like, say these tokens here with their animation indices, you could set them up with your own macros, for instance. Like, maybe even trigger an animation, then on a timer trigger another one, for example. So we've been rambling about all these animated monsters and so on, and I've just realized we should probably talk about what, like, an animation index is and what an animated token really is. So, as far as I understand it, I'm not the expert here, but I've got a decent grasp. An animated token is a particular asset, I suppose. Like, take this Earth Elemental, for instance. And this Earth Elemental has a series of animations baked into it, like this idle animation here. So it's not like separate files that you apply onto the Earth Elemental. The Earth Elemental just inherently is animated this way. And then what we're doing is we're triggering them to play these animations at certain times. Is that accurate, would you say?
Yes, it is one set of bones. They call it an armature. And then each animation is a code for how the armature moves. And since it's attached to the mesh, that's how it works. And so you could have one single mesh, and the bones can have lots and lots of different animations, which in 3D Canvas is called animation index.
Yeah. I think with things like this, it's a little tricky to talk about them because it's very, very easy to get very, very technical. And I think we're both kind of like, I'm a 3D artist, you've been creating all these animations. So obviously we've got a very good understanding of, like, the underlying technology here. But I don't want to give the impression that you need to be an animator to use this sort of thing, really. It's definitely just a case of, it's kind of like using any other ability of a token, except in this case they are animation indices or indexes, or whichever you would say, rather than, stats or abilities or attacks or that sort of thing.
I will say just a good user tip is that often my default or animation index 0 is set to be a non-animated character. So for example, if you wanted to use, if I pull out a dragon head here, this if you give it a stone texture can be great to add to dungeons, but as you can see, nothing's happening because the animation index 0, the default when you pull it out from the file browser, is often a static animation. So I can go in and simply under the 3D tab and basic, you'll see if it has an animation index option to change, it will be right here. And if I change this to 1, we can start to see that dragon head moving. Now let's say I don't want it to, if I don't want it to loop, there's a play once button. If I click that, it will just play once and then stop. And the real neat thing to do is to turn it into a clickable asset. So if I go under the 3D tab and vision, I can change it to a door. And under door style, if I link with single model animation, that's all I need to do is set it as a door and link with single model animation. And now, if I am a player or a DM, I can click it and it will.
Yeah, so this is like a bit of a kind of an advanced user tip. You can use the door system in 3D Canvas to kind of hook into these. And I think for things like this dragon head, it's especially useful because, as you might have found before, if you've ever used a token as a statue, you can just apply a stone texture like we mentioned. So with this dragon head, you apply a stone texture to it, you put it above a door, and then if you set it up with the 3D Canvas door system, then you can just click on it and have it open its mouth, and then either there's a key or a gem inside maybe, or there's fire, which would be tying in with another 3D Canvas system. So it's all a matter of tying everything together. I think these are all kind of very well integrated into 3D Canvas itself for doing really fancy things like that.
Yeah, I do have, I changed the Delian tomb, the secret door in there, so I made the statue clickable, and then the statue's staff moves down a bit before the door opens, so.
That was part of the B-roll that you probably saw in the intro. I think you can get quite a lot of mileage out of having animated props like this with stone textures and just have them essentially be interesting levers or doors or that sort of thing, where something moves in a way that the player might not expect, even if it's relatively benign, like the spear of a statue shifting downwards. I think just that is enough to kind of make it an interesting, maybe memorable kind of interaction there. I think some of the best value you'll get out of modules like this is kind of being creative with it like that. So we've gone over kind of briefly what an animated asset is. So it's just kind of a type of asset with some animations that you can switch between. And I think it's one of those things where seeing that this kind of thing is possible, just having monsters in your tabletop game animated and coming to life, is one of the kind of things that I would find inspiring, or I do find inspiring rather. So I think something I should ask, on behalf of aspiring creators out there, or people who are like looking at this 3D Canvas thing and thinking, hey, this looks pretty cool, I wonder if I could do something like that. What sort of, or how did you get started making animated assets like these? Like, were you a 3D artist beforehand?
I was not a 3D artist beforehand. I think I started with a simple chest because there was a lid and a base. I didn't use any armature or any bones. And with a little bit of Blender tutorials, I figured out how to make the lid open up fairly easily, and was able to import it into Foundry, which was probably my first success. And so you can animate simple objects without any armature or parenting the mesh at all. And then the more comfortable you get with Blender, the more you can learn about bones and armatures and how to create different animation index in the same model. I don't know if you want me to mention it. I've got some tutorials and stuff, but...
Do you have tutorials?
I do. If you follow me on YouTube, there are some tutorials, there's some time lapses, and I continue to make more. So if you're interested in something like this, if there's a particular model or a particular animation that you want to add to a model, I think that you can get pretty far with Blender, which is free, and following some tutorials, including my own, and make your own creatures move.
I'll definitely have to put that down in the description, so look for that just below the link section there. That's something I kind of agree. I mean, obviously, I might be biased because I'm like a 3D artist by trade, but I think things like Blender look like they're really complicated and that you need weeks and weeks of training to even grasp. But they're kind of increasingly becoming the kind of thing that you can just pick up as a hobby sort of thing. It's reasonably easy to learn if you're the kind of person who has Foundry and uses modules. Then I think it's definitely within your grasp to do this sort of thing.
Yeah, I was intimidated by Blender, and especially because it was hard to find tutorials on specifically how to export an asset with the animation index that matches with 3D Canvas. But I have paved the way for y'all, so please jump on board, jump in, and follow some of those tutorials, and you can make all of your stuff move.
That is a good point. You are kind of blazing a trail there with things like these tutorials. What I'd love to see with tutorials like that, or like the tutorials I've made about 3D Canvas, is seeing people kind of get interested in the hobby and then going in to then surpass anything we make just by their own creativity.
Absolutely. I would love to see what people come up with.
So you've mentioned you use Blender for this sort of thing. Partly for my own curiosity, but I'm sure there's other people out there interested as well. Could you give us like a brief rundown of what your workflow's like in terms of what you start with and then what you do and what you end up with?
Absolutely. So in Blender, I import a painted asset, something that is just from the token compendium, and I will add an armature to it. So sometimes for some creatures, I just put bones, like the gibbering mouther is not a standard humanoid form, so I added my own bones manually, and other creatures, most humanoids, I can just import a simple human structure of bones. And then I move those bones to make sure it fits in the mesh, and then they get paired together to where the mesh and the bones then are merged. So when you move the bones, the mesh moves. And from there, it's about creating animations, and each time you're done with one, you sort of name it and push it down into like a save type of format, and then you create another one, push it down until you have all of the animations, and you export to GLB, and it's imported into 3D Canvas.
So a lot of it is kind of more of a creative process, really, because animation, like, I know that there's going to be a bunch of animators who may be upset with me for saying this, but animation's kind of just like puppetry, really, when it gets right down to it. You're just kind of rotating bones and then moving it along a timeline.
Yes, I'm not an animator, so I'm just going based off of what looks good. I'm growing and learning every day, but yes, it's a very playful and creative hobby. I was thinking about a use case. Again, this might not be a typical use case, but because they all have a death, it's not really an animation, but it's a death position where they're dead, you could litter your map with whether they're zombies, whether they're dead creatures, to show that some beast kind of moved through here. And it's a great way to get a lot of use out of tokens, because they all have these lying down dead positions. Zombies in particular are great for that because they can rise up as zombies do.
I think that's something that is a good point that you mentioned that, because something that often gets overlooked with animation stuff like this is that there's also posing of creatures. Like, you could create, or you could get a creature and then simply pose it in a static way and then put it in a scene, and then it could just be a decoration at that point. Like this goblin here, absolutely out of it. Scatter a few of those around, and that really adds to the kind of flavor of the scene. By default, 3D Canvas will just like lay a dead token on its side, which is pretty handy for communicating during a game. But for when you're like creating a scene, static animations like this I think are a really great resource.
So we could see how easy I can take these kobolds and goblins, and a party walking up on this might wonder what happened, that there was maybe a scuffle between them, or perhaps they're being sneaky and just playing dead.
That is a good point. Something I have found, with my players at least, is that if I use a creature token, I give it a stone texture and I use it as a statue, they act awfully suspicious of the statue. So that might be something to keep in mind if you decide to use these. It might be a little obvious. But then again, I think it's still cool if you walk into a battlefield and then half of the creatures lying down stand up and attack you. Okay, so I think we could probably talk about animated tokens all day. Because, well, I'm a 3D artist myself, you've been creating these for a while now, and it's definitely a module to be proud of. But I think what we should probably mention just as we kind of move towards wrapping it up is what's in the module right now, and what your plans are for what you kind of plan to do with it in the future.
The module currently has over 144 monsters with 829 animations, 19 adventurers with 70 animations, 34 objects with 62 animations, and a handful of NPCs. I'm thinking for the future, obviously we're going to have some more models. NPCs, more objects. There's been a request for quadrupedal characters like farm animals for ambience. I'd like to get into terrain animations where perhaps a sinkhole opens up or the terrain changes. I could see the potential for phased bosses. So as the battle goes on, I can code the animation to change when the monster hits half their hit points, for example. It feels exciting because the possibilities are limitless.
Limitless possibilities, I think, is kind of the theme of Foundry, to be honest. I think it's one of the things that makes it like the best VTT out there. And of course, 3D Canvas kind of builds upon that. And now we're building upon that even further with all these animated assets and that sort of thing. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how we can kind of get this to develop and really bring the hobby to the next level, because we're kind of on the cutting edge here. For now, though, I think we've covered everything in brief for this video. I do want to thank you for coming along, and thank you for introducing us to the 3D assets. If anybody's interested in having a look at these, there's a free pack of assets at DigiDM's Patreon, and then there's also the premium module, which is the one that includes the compendium here with the SRE creatures and so on. Any closing comments from yourself, Digi?
Make great encounters, and see you next time.
Questions or comments and all that sort of thing, very much encouraged down in the comments below or in our Discord. I'll see you guys later.